Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. Happy 2024. We have made it over into a new year, and we are here to have that same discussion with you about health because what is true wealth? True wealth is health. Welcome. It is Monday night. So we want to ask you to share because it's Monday night and it's time for Couch Conversations. As always, we're going to go around our panel and we're going to talk to some of our esteemed panelists here and they're going to give you some introductions and then we're going to dive right over into our conversations. To Virginia, who had some questions about varicose veins, and also Karen Scott, who had shared some interest in varicose veins. We're going to run quickly over those conversations and explain what those are on tonight. January is National Thyroid Disease and Glaucoma. On next week, we're going to have a great ophthalmologist on who's going to share some information with you on glaucoma diet and how it affects diabetics and those who have hypertension. But we're going around the panel, starting with the doctor that's known as Dr. 100. That's our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green.
Hello, Nikki, Congressman. Thank you for hosting this space, a safe space for community to learn and grow from each other and share their thoughts, share ideas. I'm honored to be on here with my esteemed colleagues and learn from you all. It's a new year, but we're on the same, well, not the same. We're growing our plan for success for our community. Thank you for having me.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Connie Taylor, who's here. She says good evening to everyone. To Laura Leon, who is here, saying good evening, Laura. To Virginia Knight, who is here, she says evening, everyone. So good evening to you just as well, Virginia. Joe Harrington, the man with the plan, the one who has the best art there is. Joe, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Congressman Davis, for providing this platform. And it's good to see my colleagues again. I missed you. The holidays were great, but it's always good to be here to actually not only provide information, but learn from my colleagues. My background is primarily in healthcare and public health. I worked at 3 different hospitals in the city of Chicago and retired in 2017 from the Illinois Department of Public Health. And prior to that, I worked for the city health department. I was an assistant commissioner there and retired in 2017 as the regional health officer for Cook County and an administrative law judge.
All right. To the urologist of the stars who never wants any accolades, but he is great. The question always comes when he enters the room, is there a doctor in the house? That's our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and thanks for the plug for the radio show. The doctor is in the house and has been in the house for over 30 years now on AM 1690 WVON every Sunday. So I'm grateful for that, and as I am grateful for this opportunity to be on this panel, again, as everyone else has said, with our esteemed colleagues, and to let you know that we want you to learn something, but sometimes we learn a few things too. Sometimes there's, in your questions, that makes us think of things in ways that may not have been thought about before and gives us a different spin on some things. So we're grateful that you're here to ask questions, and we're grateful to the congressman for providing this wonderful platform, and to be able to have this esteemed group of docs right here is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much.
Outstanding. To the man who says I threaten him to be here every Monday, but he's always here. The man who is a true farmer, but he's also a physician. That's our very own Dr. James Miller.
Well, I want to say good evening and Happy New Year to everybody. We are, glad to be able to witness the beginning of this new year, and happy to be on this panel tonight. And hopefully, we are going to be able to provide some services and answer some questions. My background is in internal medicine. I practiced for about 40 years. In and around the city of Chicago. I retired in 2019. However, I'm still interested in healing our community, and healing is always needed. So we're here to try to see what we can do to expedite that process.
Outstanding. To the man who is a physician by day and a DJ by night, and if you missed his segment on social media the other day, he was on the ones and twos, you missed a great party. That's our very own Dr. Pete Thomas. Dr. Pete.
Well, Nikki, I want to tell you, I have learned to appreciate both sides of my brain, the right and the left side. And so, left side being more analytical and logical, and then the right side being more creative. So I had a great set. It was brunch, a brunch set. So house set. So it was real nice. But I'm happy to be here with my colleagues to talk about not DJing, but health, and happy to encourage the community in 2024 to improve their health incrementally. I think sometimes we can take these set these huge goals, but I heard someone say inch by inch, anything's a cinch, and then by the yard it's really hard. So I'm excited about tonight.
Outstanding, outstanding. Plus guru, the family fix, the family medicine doctor, who makes sure that he keeps you healthy, but he also sheds some pounds off you. Our Wolfgang Puck of the medicine world, our very own Dr. Tony Hampton. Dr. Hampton.
Thank you, Nikki. Happy to be here. This is my sweet spot of the year because so many people are motivated to set some goals and try to achieve their weight loss goals in particular. So I'm really happy people are motivated. I'm happy that I'll be able to, assist them with that. But I'm more happy just to have opportunities to get in front of people to help them. I work for Advocate Health, Family Doc, Obesity Doc, and I love sharing natural ways to heal. So thank you, Nikki, for the opportunity.
Outstanding. To our colleague and co-worker, Dr. Douglas Graham, who leads us to go and have fun in the sun. But I think he's feeling some of these Chicago temperatures where he's at. May not be as cold, but I think he's getting close. Doug?
Well, thank you, Nikki. All I can say is, yeah, it's not quite as cold as it is in Chicago. I'm like Dr. Miller, a retired physician. I spent 30 years working in the western suburbs and then 2 years in the representative's office in Washington, D.C. And it really changed my perspective about health and healthcare. I feel like Dr. Mason, we learned from you. I'm learning from the other doctors on the panel. It's a real honor and a treat to be here. I'm going to do my best to answer your questions if I can.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. I'm laughing at our crew. Linda Johnson is here, and she says good evening to everyone. But to our crew over at the Core Center, who is working, is sending text messages saying, Nikki, is this your sexy voice? It is not my sexy voice. This is the Nikki was excited for first Sunday at church voice, which means I was clapping and doing stuff. I visited a church yesterday over at Pastor Henderson's church, and I'm going to tell you, Luke 17:6 was off the chain when he asked to dig around you. So I got a little excited yesterday, and I was lifting my voice, and I kind of lost it. So it's not the sexy voice. It's missing for a day or so, but it'll be back. I want to thank you all for joining us. I see Sister Bonnie is here with us. Hey, Sister Bonnie, she says good evening to everyone. But of course, the man who makes this possible for us every Monday night, the one who teaches us that true wealth is health, the vanguard on healthcare, our very own Congressman, Danny K. Davis.
Well, thank you all very much. And if we were inappropriate, I'd say we got a full house. So let me just
right.
all of you for being with us at the beginning of the new year. Good things are continuing to happen. It looks as though we're not going to be shutting down the government because it appears that the two different sides have reached some tentative agreement on a continuation of funding for the federal government to operate. And so that's a good sign. We also have this week an audience with the Food and Drug Administration, and we will be talking further about the sickle cell movement in
Wonderful.
terms of how we really make use of this new therapy for treatment of sickle cell. So we're very delighted to host that meeting with the Food and Drug Administration in our office this week coming up as we get back to Washington. So thank you all. Let's dive right into healthcare and what is taking place.
Outstanding. Well, Joe, we're going to start the first of the year with you. Let's get us rolling. So we're going to ask that if you are not speaking, if you would mute, because I think we're having a lot of feedback. And Joe, you can get started. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm gonna go ahead, Nikki. And Nikki gave me a heads up that January is National Thyroid Awareness Month and Glaucoma Awareness Month. And she suggested we talk about varicosities. I think I'm pronouncing that right, and thyroid. And not being a clinician, I'm going to ask my colleagues to pick up once I end. Varicosities is more commonly known as varicose veins. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard about varicose veins. They're swollen, twisted veins that lie just under the skin. They usually occur in the legs, but they can happen somewhere else in the body. More commonly, people experience them as hemorrhoids, for example. And it's a type of varicose vein that develops in the rectum. And I got that information from the National Institute of Health's website. As for thyroid disease, there are several different types of thyroid disease. Thyroid disease is very common. An estimated 20 million people in the United States have some type of thyroid disorder. Your thyroid is a small butterfly gland. It's located at the front of your neck, under your skin. It's part of your endocrine system, and that's where things can sometimes get out of control. And it controls many of your body's important functions by producing and releasing hormones. Your endocrine system is a network of several glands that create and secrete hormones. And a gland is an organ that makes one or more substances such as hormones, digestive juices, sweats, or tears. Endocrine glands release hormones directly into the bloodstream. And lastly, hormones are chemicals that coordinate different functions in your body by carrying messages through your blood to your organs, skin, muscles, and other tissues. And these things signal and tell your body what to do and when to do it. So that's background, and it gives you hopefully some idea of what we're talking about. But I'm going to have one of my clinical colleagues go into more detail and pick one of those items and maybe shed a little light on it. And I know Dr. Maya is the teacher, so I'll let her begin.
Well, you know what? I thank you for outlining it. I think it does help us to kind of wrap our understanding around what's going to happen tonight. We got a lot to cover. I want to start, and I want to follow you and start in the order that you listed them. So you started with varicose veins or varicosities, and so thank you for kind of briefing us on that. Yes, about 40 million people, in the U.S. are experiencing this stuff, and I mean varicose veins or things like that. And what varicose veins are when we look at how our blood travels to our tissues and back to our heart, back to our lung to get oxygen. It's like a cycle, right? Imagine when we were all going to school, we wake up in the morning at the heart, at the home, we get our nourishment. Those are the lungs, which is oxygen, other minerals, things like that, right? And then we go to school. We take a bus. That bus is going to get on the highway. Then it's going to get on the street, or a main street like King Drive, Madison, South Side, West Side, let's do it all. And then you get on your smaller streets that then arrive at the house or the end organ, the kidney, the toe, the wherever it's going, the nose, wherever it's going. After you've done what you had to do, you went to school, you use your nutrients to learn, you did what you came to do, or you go to work, you did what you came to do. you're going to go home and rest and get your nutrients back up. So it has to go back to the heart. So what I just described, going to home, going to work, and returning on the highways and byways, are the way the blood moves through our bodies, right? Arteries start at the heart and they arrive at school or work. Veins in our lymph system are going to carry everything back home. Those highways and byways, they go back home, right? Now you tired, you did what you need to do. You trying to go straight home, right? So veins need to be a straight course through the liver and, you know, to the heart. We want to go straight there. But varicosities are when there's so much pressure, so much trafficking and congestion, things start trying, you going to take the side street. Now you at Stone 95th and Stony Island is backed up. So much pressure in that space. You decide to take a side street. And what always happens when you take a side street during traffic, high traffic? You end up taking longer, frustrated, things like that. So if I'm blood and I'm taking a side street, that vein then starts to twist and turn. A lot of times, if you read the medical journals, they'll call it tortuous, meaning it's not doing a straight line. It's trying to find other pockets to go through. And when that happens, your vein kind of gets swollen, right? There's turbulence. Now you try to take the side street, other people try to take, now you're trying to get back. And so things are all kind of discombobulated, you frustrated. So the vein experiences that as aching, you know, and then because of the pressure, and remember, you got other blood, the traffic is backed up. Now you got throbbing, like go, 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 like the horn. So now you got bulging, aching, throbbing, swelling. And then unfortunately, just like a traffic jam, if it doesn't get fixed, the vein pops and sometimes it can cause sores. So that's what a varicosity is when the straight highway and byway back to the heart, back to the home to get the nutrients and rest and get what it needs, gets backed up and pressured, and it starts poking out, bulging and turning and twisting, trying to find some relief or get back home. And it causes aching and things like that. Now, what causes that? A lot of times if you're standing for a long time, because remember, my body, yes, the heart is helping, but it has gravity. So right here, these veins and arteries receive less pressure than right here. And the lower you get, the more that gravity and that pressure is happening. So if I'm standing, it's like trying to pull, but trying to go up and things like that. It puts pressure. Other things that put pressure on our blood vessels, increase weight, right? Because that increases the gravity, increases the pressure, things like that. Sometimes when people are pregnant or with child, because all of our vessels relax. I know y'all, I know I'm missing one because I'm going off top of you, but I know I'm missing one. As we mature, because it's been doing it for a long time, the roads get bogged down and just cracked and things like that, and they start to malfunction. So when you feel that aching and bulging and things like that, you go to your doctor puts a little scan to see, are the highways and byways going straight up? Nope, they turn. That's called an ultrasound, or in some cases, they'll do a graph of that artery vein. Of that vein, and that's called a venograph. And then what do we do when we do it? We say, hey, also prevention and treatment, you can exercise, right? That keeps you from sitting or standing long term, which decreases the likelihood that pressure is just static sitting there in that traffic jam. Sometimes they go in and straighten it out. You can get, that done. And then the other thing that we do is, you can decrease the weight. But those stockings, remember those stockings, they look like tights, but they look like the elastic band. Those are called compression stockings. And a lot of confusion comes with compression stockings because you want to know the pressure. Sometimes you see them, they come to the knee, they come to the thigh, they go to the ankle. Your doctor will tell you, and it usually depends on after they do that scan to see how far up the problem is. That's how we determine how far up your stockings got to go. They're uncomfortable. We wear them, and then not one of the guidelines, but something I, have found success with my patients, talk to your doctor about it, is online now, cheaper and cheaper. They have these little boots that squeeze, and they squeeze your leg and make the leg kind of do a pump and move around, even when you're laying down. So talk to your doctor about if that's an option for you and how long you should do it. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to join me in explanation of varicose veins. No? Okay.
Dr.
Please.
Miller came off mute.
Yeah,
I don't know if he wanted to
Okay.
say something.
yeah. I think
I
Dr. Meyer.
want to. I want to say something, but I'll be very brief because Maya reminded me something, the importance of the circulatory system and the red blood cells. And it's the red blood cells that carry oxygen and vital nutrients to the tissues. And if you don't get that oxygen and the nutrients to the tissues will die. So what she's talking about is very important. Once they give up, the red blood cells give up that, then the veins are what carry that venous blood, which is now blue because it no longer has oxygen, back to the heart. So it's a cycle. It goes back to the heart, gets a fresh supply of oxygen and nutrients, and it repeats itself. And it happens somewhere between 60 to 90 seconds every time. That's when the heart's going to beat and when it pumps. So what we're talking about is the circulatory system, and it is vital to maintain life. Dr. Miller.
Yeah, Dr. Meyer gave an excellent explanation of how this venous system work. And so only a couple little things that I wanted to add is that as the blood vessels get dilated and the circulation doesn't flow at the rate that it normally flow at, then blood when it sits, it tends to get a little thickened, or other kinds of injuries start to happening and cause clotting and thrombosis, and so those are other kinds of complications that can occur from these problems with varicose veins. And so that's one of the big issues that we're always concerned about when people do get varicosity, is that are they going to get blood clots, and are these blood clots going to migrate and cause damage to some of the other organ systems?
Oh, I'll chime in, and just got ahead of you, Pete. But I think one of the things I think about a lot of times, this you tend to think it's a problem of women, but it can absolutely affect men as well, particularly in those jobs where you have to stand. I think about my wife. She actually is a pharmacist, and she stands all day, which is amazing to me. Like literally all day. They don't sit. In my world, we actually sit a lot because we're sitting by the computer and talking to patients. So we have this conventional model, which we've kind of shared most of that. I think sclerotherapy is a one thing that we may have not touched on. And imagine having a needle that goes into that vein, and you put the solution in that'll actually make that vein that has the varicose to scar. And essentially that vein is going to, kind of collapse and fade away. It'll then allow the healthier veins to actually take over where that left off. And usually if it's done well and you have good luck with it, it'll disappear. And I do agree that so what you have is you have a problem with moving the fluid, like Doc has just shared, but you also have the integrity of the vessel is not healthy, and that's why we spend a lot of time talking about nutrition and being healthy. And in the world I live in, it's you're gonna get a lot of collagen when you eat the type of food that's high in collagen. That collagen is responsible for the elasticity or the flexibility of the blood vessels. So eating food high in collagen, or even supplementing with collagen, is very effective at helping your vasculature and because all of that elastic tissue requires collagen. Your skin needs collagen. So if you think about wrinkles on your face, most of that occurs because you stop making collagen. That's why our babies have a glow. That's why pregnant people have a glow, because they have an excessive amount of collagen. It helps them. But that's also true for our blood vessels. So we want to do a good job there, because it's the beginning of the year. We think about our weight. And yes, if you have more weight than your body needs, that's going to cause not only pressure on those blood vessels, but it's also going to cause inflammation. And one thing about being heavier is that those fat cells actually cause inflammation. That inflammation will then disrupt the lining of your blood vessels, and therefore make you more prone to this type of problem. And the only other thing I'll throw at this is from a natural perspective, there are some essential oils that make a huge difference. There's one called cypress essential oil. And that essential oil is very, probably the most common oil that's recommended for varicose veins. And you can just rub that into your area where the varicose veins are 2 or 3 times a day, and that'll actually help it as well. So a lot of it is dietary, a lot of it is movement, a lot of it is weight loss. And then you really want to kind of, it's like a soup. You want to use all of these different approaches to help people who are suffering from this.
Pete, you had something to say before I read through these questions?
I think my colleagues hit it, covered it 360. The only thing I will say is the last patient I saw with this, I tried to explain or to set the bar for patients that I say this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's very difficult for patients because it's really, they have to adjust their lifestyle for it. The person that I saw was a biker and they really liked to bike, but you know, it does mean some adjustment to your lifestyle. So I'm not saying you can't ever bike again, but like you have to be careful about trauma, because what happens to the skin, you could get something called stasis dermatitis, where the skin gets really tough because of the fluid that's built up in your legs. And so which could predispose you to wounds, and you know, which can get infected. And then so, you know, it's just, you just have to be patient, because you're gonna have to see a lot of specialists, maybe a plastic surgeon, of course the vein specialist. So you want to just know that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's going to mean a lifestyle adjustment. It's going to mean quite a few doctor appointments, particularly with the specialists. Many times they come to us, but for us, we're just sort of managing the symptoms. We're not, you know, we're not really solving their problems in terms of the vein integrity itself.
Outstanding.
Doctor. No, I was going to say Dr. Mason and Dr. Graham haven't chimed in. I know they have something to say, so I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to chime in.
No, I mean, thank you, Joe. But a couple of things I just did want to say. I was actually looking up because I forgot how. I know the heart beats somewhere around 70 times a minute. If you
60
figure
to 90, somewhere in between 60 to 90.
Yes, well, it depends on their level of activity.
Right.
But the one thing about the heart is it never takes a break. The only break the heart gets is between beats. And so when we talk about things that need energy and the nutrients from the foods we eat, the heart's one of them. And that's why when the heart, the blood vessels that feed the heart, and that's why we call these things the wrong things. We call them a heart attack, but that's not the disease. The problem isn't the heart. The problem is the blood vessels that feed the heart that get blocked. The same thing is true for those people who end up with poor circulation in their legs. It's not that the legs are a problem. What happens is that what we've done is, with the method that Dr. Tony introduced a minute ago, the damage to these blood vessels that carry blood to all the organs, including our brains and our legs and our eyes and all those things. If those blood vessels, those pipes get damaged, and so now it can't get the blood, and the blood is, as they've already said, is where all those nutrients are. So what we need to do is, and I've been trying to talk about this, is that we have to stop calling the diseases what they're not. A heart attack is the aftermath, but that's not the disease. The disease is the blood vessels that feed the heart. And if there's blood vessel damage in those, if there's damage in those blood vessels, you got them in the ones that feed the brain. You got them in the one that feed the lung, your brain. You got them in the ones that feed all the organs in your body. So we should not just be thinking about these things in that way. That what we need to do is, you don't need something special to clear the help with the blood vessels in the heart, or in the blood vessels that feed the brain, or the ones that feed your legs that keep you from getting your toes and what have you amputated. It's the same thing for all three, for all of it. And it starts with what we put in our mouths at the table. And so there's a lot of things that, and Dr. Tony mentioned the word inflammation, and there are a lot of foods that cause inflammation, which is like sandpaper scratching your skin, and it forms a scab, and then that scab can break off depending on where it goes and stop the blood from going all around. So the point I'm making, and I'll shut up, is that these diseases that we have are really misnamed. They're all misnamed, and we start talking about them from the end organ, but if we talk about it from the point of cause, then there's no way you get around that conversation without talking about food.
Yeah, Dr. Graham, I know you had something that you wanted to say.
I really think this has been a great discussion. It's been very comprehensive. The one thing that struck my mind is, this is where you really want to see your physician early. That an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When you first starting to see these little bumps on your legs and ask the question, is this be looked at? The answer is yes. When you get to the stage of discoloration, that's also yes. You really want to prevent the stage where you start getting holes in your skin called ulcers, because those are painful and difficult to heal. So that's why I was just going to say that early detection, working with your physician, is one of the ways to stay out of the painful and uncomfortable and difficult situation.
Outstanding. Well, Lori Rupert says good evening to everyone. Nellie Purnell King says good evening. Marshall Oliver is here with us, and he says hello to everyone. Nellie Purnell King also says venous insufficiency. Pastor Crystal Kyles is here, and she says hello to everyone. Then we have a few questions. I'm going to throw 3 questions at you at one time. I know you guys will get on top of it in just a moment. Audrey Jaycock says good evening to everyone. Nellie Purnell King says, does trauma to the leg cause venous insufficiency? Also, we have a second question about venous insufficiency in a way. The young lady is anonymous, and she says, Dr. Pete, you mentioned in reference to hardness of the leg and darkness of the leg. How dangerous can these varicose veins be? I am afraid each and every day that I may come up with some type of blood clot in my veins.
Yeah, we can go backwards. So I would say, for the majority of people, they're more cosmetic, which means, maybe, you're concerned about the way it looks. These are superficial veins, so they tend not to cause blood clots. The clots that are life-threatening are what we call DVT, or deep vein thrombosis. Those are the ones that can travel from the lower extremities of legs into your lung and potentially risk your life. These are more superficial veins. They can cause third spacing or swelling of the legs, which can harden the skin of the legs and then predispose the skin. The skin can become thin and predispose the skin to become susceptible to infections. So to that degree, yes, and to that degree, to the extent that you can, again, as my colleague said, act earlier, wear those TED holes, keeping that fluid, back up, and helping those veins become less incompetent and more competent with that high pressure TED holes or stockings, and then going to see the specialist early. So for me, I'm really a advocate of getting my patients to the specialist early before a lot of the tertiary problems happen as a result of the swollen blood veins and things like that. So I would say it's not necessarily life-threatening right away. I know some patients who have to be on chronic blood thinners like Eliquis and apixaban. And my colleagues can help me with this if that's more preventive. I don't know how much data is behind that, considering what I just said. But I do get patients who have been seen by other providers, and they come to see me. And I would normally send them to a hematologist before I feel comfortable taking them off of that blood thinner, as a result of their varicose veins. So again, so every patient is different, right? So you have some people with very, very bad varicose veins. I mean, they like big swollen knots coming out of your skin, and you have some that's just kind of, you can see them, but it's not very visible. But you do get a lot of pitting edema, or the skin is, you can press down and it'll leave that indentation. So it varies per patient. But I would encourage you to see your primary care and advocate for seeing a specialist earlier. And sometimes what I will find is that you send someone to a specialist, and the specialist like, just kind of really cavalier about it. Go see another one. Like, don't take that. I don't play that. Don't take that. We're gonna go see somebody else, and it's gonna be within network too. So if they have a problem, you can say, listen, whatever insurance, as soon as enrollment happens, I'm out of here. So you're gonna send me to another specialist or else. And what they listen to money. If they know one of their clients is about to leave, they'll be like, okay, we'll let you see another vein specialist with maybe out of network. If that vein specialist is not treating you and you don't feel happy with their service.
Yeah, Pete, I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
One is you talked about superficial veins. Why
Yeah.
don't you explain what a superficial vein is?
Yeah, so so those are the veins that's closer to the skin, as opposed to the deep veins that's closer to the bone and within the muscle itself. Those are the veins that's more life threatening or potentially life threatening. And so that's why I said, so these are veins that's closer toward the skin. That's why you see them, in your skin or outside of your skin when people wear shorts and things like that. So that's the difference. So superficial, we mean they're closer toward the outside of the leg as opposed to deeper inside the leg itself. Those are the deep ones are the ones that can potentially cause the life-threatening. And again, they're not related. So people can have deep vein thrombosis and never have varicose veins. And a lot of people have varicose veins and superficial thrombophlebitis and never have DVT. So DVT is something that's another whole discussion, right? The deep vein thrombosis. There's something called Virchow's triad. Virchow was a physician, and he sort of he outlined 3 conditions that will predispose you to having a deep vein thrombosis. One is lower extremity injury. 2 is prolonged immobilization. So someone's on a flight to Europe or China or something like that. And then 3 is a familial hypercoagulable state. So if you have like factor V Leiden deficiency or something like that. So there's people who have genetic predisposition or prolonged immobilization. You're on a flight or plane or whatever for a long time, or you have a lower extremity injury. So let's say you break your leg. So you don't need to have all 3. You can have one of those 3. But Virchow talks about those 3 as being the sort of cardinal signs that someone might be at risk for having a DVT. Then there's a percent of DVTs that happen spontaneously. About 15% happens spontaneously. And those people just get now this is my anecdotal answer to that is that those people probably have a unknown genetic predisposition. We don't know what genetic condition they have, but some kind of way and deep down in their family, they got some condition where they have a predisposition for blood clots. But again, this is another discussion. This is not venous insufficiency or varicose vein. This is a DVT. Is a totally different condition.
Yeah, and you talked about seeing a specialist, and you mentioned hematologist.
Yeah. So I'll say the specialist I will 99% refer to is the vascular docs, vascular surgery. Those are the guys that work on the veins, and there are particular vascular doctors that work on veins. All right, so I will have to specify that in the referral when I'm sitting it through the computer. But some people will come to me on blood thinners, and when I'm unclear why they're on a blood thinner, even though they have a superficial vein problem, I don't just take them off of the blood thinner. I want to find out because sometimes patients are unaware. And when I say, hey, have you had a blood clot in your leg? So they look at these big veins and they say, yeah, I got one. You can see it. But no, I'm talking about a different kind of blood clot, right? But if you're not able to articulate to me why you're on that, I'm not just going to take you off. I'm going to have you to see a blood specialist, which is different than the vascular surgeon, called a hematologist. And hematologist can do the workup to see why, or does this person really need to be on this blood thinner? And because the blood thinner tends to be more applicable for the deep vein problems and not the superficial vein problems.
You know, I really thanks very much for the conversations from my other colleagues, but I would like to also uh, have some of the internists, because I know this isn't, because in medical school we're not trained in nutrition. We're not trained. We're not trained. I was in med school, University of Illinois, for 4 years. We had 40 minutes of nutrition.
We had 2 weeks, Terry.
You had what?
We had 2 weeks.
We had 40 minutes. 40 minutes in 4 years of nutrition. And so there's a real woefully missing thing. And we've been really trying to talk at the University of Illinois in particular about trying to do something about that. Because when you just hear the reports that you hear on radio and television, what have you, when you talk about what the impact of eating quote unquote fast foods or junk foods and things of that nature are. And if my colleagues, since I don't do this, but my colleagues could comment on just the role of something as simple as salt. If you could comment on what that does and how it actually complicates some of these conditions, maybe not the DVT, but hypertension and congestive heart failure, where the people's legs are swelling up. I think that might help our constituency quite a bit.
So, Dr. Mason, thanks for introducing that. And salt really is a problem. Salt is something that acts like a sponge and expands the amount of water that you're carrying. And that water is going to go downhill into your legs. So the legs are going to swell, and that's going to make it harder for that blood to return back to the heart because they have to work through all of that swelling. So that is an issue. And there's a new study that shows that if you add salt to your food, you're increasing your chance of getting kidney disease, which is critical to filtering. So salt is a major problem here. I'd also talk about exercise too, because one of the ways that your body returns the blood to the heart is through exercise. That doesn't mean that you have to run a marathon. That doesn't mean you have to try it for the football team. You're just walking. Maybe one of the ways to improve that blood flow and get that blood back to where you want it.
And we need to think about the foods that contain a lot of sodium, not just sprinkling the salt, but there's other foods. There's other ways to get it.
Yeah.
But it's also important to point out that sodium is a naturally occurring element. So just about anything you eat is going to have some level of sodium. So if you use a lot of table salt, you're really creating a problem, because you're going to get more sodium you need in the foods you eat without adding any spices or anything.
That's a good point, Joseph. But it's like when I talk about looking at the labels, if you look at soy sauce, you only need 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day for healthy nutrition. Soy sauce is about 960 milligrams per teaspoon. If you look at raw men, that's got about 1,100 milligrams of sodium in it. If you look at, of that nature, everything is well 600, 700 milligrams of sodium. So it's very easy to cross that threshold of 1,500 and get into a salty environment, which causes you to retain fluid, which makes your heart work harder and makes your blood vessels work harder. They're going to wear out quicker if you make them work harder.
Yeah, and one of the things that people may not recognize is people are eating. They might not recognize that food that is cured with salt will automatically have more salt in its content. So if you're eating cured bacon or some of these other things like sausages and those things, ham is often cured with salt. So these are things to preserve these foods so that they'll last for longer periods of time and be edible for longer periods of time. However, they do have a downside, and that downside is that when you consume them, you're usually consuming an excess amount of salt, more than what your body needs or can handle, taking it in that volume over a short period of time.
Now, Dr. Miller, you know how I love ham. Why would you jump on the ham?
So, Nikki, you're okay.
Dr. Mason, don't listen.
They're making hams with lower salt. If you go
Very
to
good.
look at the labels, some are 960, some are 540, some are around 300. So people have been paying attention to this, and there have been changes in some of these processed foods that are marketed to us. But they're right. Sausage usually has over 600 milligrams of sodium in it. 2 sausages, 1,200 milligrams, you're almost at your daily limit.
Well, what about a smoked turkey wing?
You'd probably have to look at the package insert.
I'm just throwing some stuff out here so our viewers can make sure that they are paying attention. You know, Connie Taylor asked the question. She says, what causes nodules to form on the thyroid? Since it's common, when does this present problems, and how do you best treat the nodules on the thyroid? And also, Terry Johnson asked the question about she has a problem with her hands and feet peeling, and it has been almost a phenomenon or a mystery to her doctors. Has anyone ever seen this before? So who wants to attack the nodules first?
I'll take the nodule problems. They're very, very common, and most of them are found by accident, not deliberately. Some of them are just a part of the aging of the thyroid, and they'll form normally. Some of them are not. So the easiest way to look at these is doing a test called an ultrasound or a sonar, where they bounce sound waves off the nodule. And since they're so common, people have developed a table for looking at them and knowing what to do based on their size, whether they're filled with fluid or solid, whether or not the borders are smooth or rough, or whether or not there's extra blood flow around the edges of the nodule. And all those things help guide the thyroid surgeon in terms of what to do next. So the basic thing is to get the sonar, look at those criteria, and ask someone to make a determination, what are the next steps? Most of the time, this is a very common, safe problem, and nothing much needs to be done.
Okay. What about those peeling feet and hands? The mystery.
Yeah, I'm not sure when she says peeling, but sometimes it can be a superficial fungal infection. If it's feet, not necessarily on the hands, could just be dry skin too. Seborrheic dermatitis. It could be, which you just use an emollient or any sort of like something with a Vaseline, that's old school. Mama go there and they hook that Vaseline up and just start smacking you and rubbing you with it. Okay. that means that skin was dry and they just get this.
Did it work?
No, but yeah, it could just be dry skin and but go see your doctor, take a picture of it when it's really bad, because oftentimes my patients say, it was really bad when I made the appointment. Then by the time the appointment happens, now it's acting like it's going to get better. So that always happens. So just take a picture of it when it's really bad or when you haven't put all your lotion on and stuff, and then let them see it.
Well,
Steve, if you or Dr. Maya could explain a bit more about water pills, what they are, why people get them, what do they really get rid of, and why are they being used, or individually or in combination? Any of the internists on that.
And Maya, Dr. Maya, while you're looking into that, or any of the interns, that actually goes right into a question that Nellie Purnell was asking Dr. Mason. She says, does using Lasix and fluid reduction, does it work for high blood pressure, or does it harm the liver? So if you guys can attack both what Dr. Mason is asking, adding in what Nellie Purnell King asked, that would be great. You're muted, Maya.
Hello. All right. Sure, no problem. So water pills. What are water pills? Water pills are something that in certain circles we call diuretics, and they're called that because they impact the kidney. Through a function that Dr. Graham kind of mentioned. Dr. Graham was talking about it in the general body, When we talk about water pills, we're talking about the impact that the pill is going to have specifically on the kidney, because that's, where we collect and move a lot of our water, and therefore on the rest of the body, right? Because if you move water out, you lose water in the body. If you hold water in, you gain water in the body. Dr. Graham earlier, talking about another thing, said salt effectively acts like a sponge. And why does salt effectively act like a sponge? Because it works through two different main mechanisms, but usually what they tell you is where salt goes, water goes, okay? Where other glucose, water goes. Where sodium or potassium goes, water goes. Water wants to kind of spread itself, just like if you spill water on the table, you had it in the cup, it stays in the cup. You spill it on the table, it tries to spread everywhere it possibly can. That's what water does, right? And so that's water's goal. It's trying to go all over your body and rehydrate, things like that. Sometimes it builds up. We give you a water pill, because then we say that pill goes in the body and says, okay, I want to get rid of this salt. I want to get rid of this water. What do I need to do? Get rid of some of the salt. Get rid of some of the sugar, because water is just going to follow it. Like, okay, you going that way, right? And so water will follow that. So what effectively happens, and I want to point out two things. If you are on a medicine that ends in PRIL, just because I've been seeing a lot of it, it doesn't work if you continue to eat salt. It don't work at all. You know how people are like, I'm gonna eat salt because I'm on lisinopril and I got high blood pressure. Well, the salt inactivates it. Okay, so it doesn't work if you continue to eat the salt. Number one. Number two, what it will do is take the minerals, salt, sugars, potassium, potassium is salt, but your salts and sugars, your minerals, and it'll cause the kidney to spill certain types of them depending on what medicine it is. When a kidney starts letting it out, the water will follow. So yes, it works for high blood pressure. Why? Because if you have more water in your blood vessels, the pressure is like water balloons, right? You fill them up with water, and the balloon is your blood vessel. You fill it up with water, it starts to push on that thing that I believe Mr. Harrington talked about, or no, Dr. Hampton talked about, which is the elasticity of the vessel. It starts to push on it, and then when it gets really full, it builds up pressure high in your blood vessel. That's called high blood pressure, right? And the other blood vessel that it builds up pressure in is your heart, right? Because your heart is a vessel. And then in the water balloon, it pops. Well, we don't want that. So what we do is we give you stuff to move that water out through your kidney, and then it lowers your blood pressure, right? Also, if you have pressure on your heart or fluid in your other places, your lungs, legs, things like that, it will move the water out, because it will move the mineral out, and the water be like, okay, I guess we're going out now. And then and that's what it does.
I just have one other follow-up, if I could, to the internist, not any of you. But why is the combination of diabetes and or hypertension such a bad problem?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dr.
I'll take a shot. So it's really a vascular issue. So the inner layer of the blood vessels are particularly sensitive to the pressure in which the fluid or the blood is flowing through the blood vessel. So the blood vessel can become damaged as a result of that pressure. Now, if you add to that the blood also being highly glycosylated as a result of the high blood sugar, that is more trauma that happens to that inner layer. When that inner layer of the blood vessel becomes damaged, your body appropriately tries to repair itself, and then it becomes occluded eventually. So if you can imagine, if every time a cut or slash happens on on a surface, and I keep trying to patch it. And every time I'm patching, I apologize for my dog and everything here, guys. But it's trying to patch and patch and patch, and then over time, now that blood vessel that was like this is now like this, and so that limits blood supply to your end organs and so for us, the most important critical organs being, brain, heart, kidneys, and so that's what we call macrovascular disease. Now we know diabetes causes microvascular disease. That's the retinopathy behind the eyes and also behind the kidneys, and also in the periphery. That's how people develop ulcers and eventually become their legs can become amputated. But the macrovascular disease happens as a result of what you just said, Terry. The combination, that double whammy of blood pressure, high blood pressure that causes damage to that inner layer, and the glycosylated hemoglobins, the high blood sugar in the blood that causes damage and inflammation of that inner layer that eventually becomes occluded as a result of just all of the damage plus repair. So that endothelial layer is where all of the damage happens and the repair happens, and the damage and the repair and the damage repair, and eventually this happens. Now only a small supply of blood can get to those critical organs, and that's where somebody can start having chest pain, because the heart is not getting the appropriate blood supply that it needs to do its job.
And that's related to peripheral vascular disease and kidney disease and need for transplant. How?
So say that again, Terry.
And I said, and that's how do you relate that to peripheral, what we call
Yeah.
peripheral artery disease, and the things that end up in needing to do bypasses in the legs and all, and then end up with kidney disease where you need a transplant.
Yeah, so we used to have a saying, when you have bad pipes somewhere, you got bad pipes everywhere. So like a lot of times, Terry, you would even say, a lot of men would come in with endothelial, or let's say erectile dysfunction. And those are those tiny blood vessels in the penis that are becoming occluded and not getting the appropriate blood supply, because that's obviously how the penis becomes erect. So you can imagine when that high blood sugar plus high blood pressure is damaging those blood vessels, it's damaging blood vessels everywhere. And so the blood vessels that supply the lower extremities, and that's the peripheral vascular disease. That's how people eventually develop the ulcers in their feet, or their feet get really dark. And we have to end up doing ultrasounds to make sure they're having blood supply to those areas. But the problem happened way before then as a result of uncontrolled blood pressure and uncontrolled blood sugar. And that's one of the reasons why there's a school of thinking that we should even start treating pre-diabetics, because even minor elevated levels in those blood sugars can begin the little sort of micro lacerations on that inner blood vessel that eventually starts the cascade, right, of the tear, build, and then eventually this open blood vessels now is no longer so open, and you are steady your body has to function, right? The heart has to beat, the legs have to walk, the brain has to think, but it needs blood supply in order to do that. But if your blood sugar and blood pressure is so high, and so and I tell my patients, to be patient while we work on getting you the appropriate medications to bring both the blood sugar and blood pressure down, but also you implement the appropriate lifestyle modifications. And it's not a one or the other. It's not an either or, but it's an and. We need both. We need you actively working at your lifestyle, eating better, making better decisions. But we know that takes time. It takes time for that to happen, or even takes time for by the time that you start to eat better consistently. I don't mean like a you got a weekend that you just, you hit out the park, and then for like the next 2 weeks, you know, you're not as consistent. So we want to make sure that your organs, and I tell my patients, we want to protect those end organs. So when we're trying to implement these medications, I don't have no stock in these medicines. I don't. It ain't. That's not what I do. But what I do is I want to protect those end organs, brain, heart, kidney, lower extremity, legs, while you implement those lifestyle changes. And that's generally the plan. So when people say so and so died of diabetes, so and so died of vascular disease, they didn't die of diabetes. Diabetes destroyed the blood vessels, which eventually led to vascular disease.
Yeah, I want to throw something out because I went and you reminded me of something I hear people talk about all the time. And people wonder about the proliferation of dialysis centers that are popping up all over Black and brown communities. And I wanted to share some data that I just looked up. Globally, 39% of adults aged 18 years and older were overweight or obese in 2016. In most high income countries, that's around 2/3 of adults. But in the United States, that's 70%. And so people wonder why are all these people in dialysis? Hypertension and diabetes are the leading cause of kidney failure. That's why all these people are in dialysis. It didn't just
Yeah.
happen, and it didn't just happen overnight. And so,
Yeah.
really, what we're talking about is something that we can over time reverse.
And
And
I know we got to.
can the physicians clear something up for me real quick? So, Dr. Meyer, you speak right after this, but please answer this question for me. Can you please let our viewers know that it's not just overweight people who have hypertension, or it's not just overweight people who suffer from diabetes, that people who may be underweight or very thin can have the same thing. And just because you may be thin in nature does not mean that you should not be getting your yearly checkups and your physicals. Can you share that, please?
Okay, absolutely. Unless one of my colleagues want to take it, I know I've certainly shared a lot. Okay. So you remember, so diabetes. Oh, Dr. Mason said this earlier. I'm just saying the things that people have already said. Diabetes, people think it's just sugar, right? Diabetes is a part of a whole metabolic, a whole dysfunction or imbalance that is, sometimes we're predisposed, but it is made worse or exacerbated or pushed towards dysfunction by the things we take in our body, right? Dr. Mason said, stop calling things, what they not. Stop calling diabetes sugar. Stop calling, not, stop basing it on that. What it is the dysfunction of our organ that is exacerbated by the things we put in our body. The same thing with high blood pressure. It is a dysfunction of our blood vessels due to stress. A lot of times genetic, yes, but a lot of times it's stress and the things we're eating. And so if we don't eat the right things, and the pressure from gaining weight may add to it, but that does not mean, like, if we are what is affectionately called at weight or normal weight, that does not mean that we're not putting in things in our body and that we don't have those dysfunctions, right? And I just want to tie it all in by saying the things they just talked about. Remember, I said, well, lisinopril don't work if you're eating salt, and tying it all in with what Dr. Graham said, what was just said about nutrition intake. Because remember, I told you, water wants to flow where it feels it's needed. It's going to flow where it's less water. And that's why when you watch lakes and rivers, they flow in a certain direction because of resistance, and and it goes like that. That's why if you pop a balloon, everything else is a barrier. That one hole, it'll shoot out that one hole. That's why water comes in one direction out of holes unless you pop it other ways, right? So water is forming. And so the salt, high blood pressure, the sugar, diabetes or glucose and imbalance, it's not, it says, hey, water, I'm over here. That's why when you eat a lot of salt, you get thirsty, and water wants to kind of follow it. It says, "Hey, water, I'm over here. Let's go this way." So if I give you medication, or if you're taking a nutrition diet that's going to encourage water to leave your body and bring balance to it, but then you putting salt and sugar back in your body, this water's like, which way am I going? And so that's why the medicines don't work if you don't take care of the first medication, which is your nutrition.
One of the other things that I like to just point out is that we was talking about you talking about weight and about other things. The by the time that we find out that someone has diabetes or hypertension, more than likely the problem has been there for some time. Damage has already been done. Now, some of this damage can be repaired if it's not severe. However, so we have to make certain that one is that's why everybody need to make certain that they're getting their annual evaluation done, and that they're seeing a primary care doctor, because damage occur that's not recognized by the eyes, not recognized by our blood tests. And so, the normal blood tests that we do in terms of CBC, there are some special tests that one can take that will say, yeah, there's a problem. So before we know that we have diabetes, probably damage has been done by diabetes to our bodies already.
Wow. Want to say hey to Claude Robinson, who's here. Donald Buster Woods is here with us. And he says, good evening to all. Hattie Lake is here, and she says, Hattie is watching. And Diamond Hayes is here, and she says, hi from Life is Work. Well, it's that time. And I know you guys hate to hear me say that it's that time, but it is that time. And we're going to go around and do our until next Monday. Dr. Mason, what's your until next Monday?
Well, I would say we should be all aware that there are usually no symptoms of any kind for most of these diseases in the earliest stage. So don't, just because you feel good, don't mean you are good. And, in God we trust, all others must have data. So always get information. Don't go by how you feel, because that's not going to always tell you where you are.
All right, Dr. Miller, your until next Monday.
I'm going to actually add on to what Dr. Mason said, in this. Everything that looked good isn't always good, because what we look at on the outside may be different than what it represented on the inside. So make certain that the inside is evaluated as well.
Outstanding. Dr. Graham, your until next Monday.
Well, Nikki, I'm going to actually say two. My first one is I want to express my appreciation for the physicians on this panel, because when I went to medical school, I got no nutrition in the 40 years ago when I went to medical school. And I have learned so much, and I know that I've been able to improve my health from following their advice. So that's my number one. My number two is COVID is back, and it's so bad. And I want to tell you that I feel there's been a lot of mis and disinformation about vaccines and how they work. My youngest daughter is a teacher, and so I thought about this, and I said, vaccines are not going to change you. There's no microchip. It's not going to change your DNA. But it's kind of like taking a test. If you've ever gone to school and you weren't prepared for a test, most of us didn't do very well. But if you had a chance to study for a couple of days before you take the test, you generally do better. All the vaccine is like is studying for your body. So when it gets the test, it does better. They're safe, they're effective. It's time to get them again.
Outstanding, outstanding. Dr. 100, your until next Monday.
Until next Monday, y'all know that. Hit those, hit the COVID, hit the hands, wash it, catch that thumb. Don't touch your face, or practice not touching your face, because I know I'm straightening my glasses and things like that. So we may be a little bit out of the practice of what we need to do. But now is the time to start. Now is also the time to start thinking about your support network, things like that, especially in this season, and how you're going to protect your tribe. Like, start thinking about it now, because it's already, as I say, it's already in the streets. Don't wait till it hit your door. Until next Monday. Hi, Diamond.
Outstanding. Joe Harrington, your until next Monday.
Well, I've got two as well. I'm going to piggyback on what Doug was saying and just remind people that COVID is not left. I mean, we missed the opportunity for herd immunity. We're learning to live with COVID. It's a seasonal disease. It's more active during some seasons. So we're learning to live with COVID. So don't think that this is something that's going to all of a sudden disappear and people won't be talking about COVID. We'll be talking in COVID until well after some of us are gone. So that's one thing. And so whatever you need to do to protect yourself, you need to do to protect yourself. The other thing, this is a leap year, and some people probably are aware of it and knew that this was a leap year, but it means we get one extra day. So that means that starting tomorrow, you have 358 new days, and that gives you 358 new chances to make a fresh start.
Outstanding, Joe. Outstanding. Well, I must piggyback off everything that everyone has said, and that's with this. The Chicagoland area healthcare systems again are requiring visitors to wear masks and to mask up to help mitigate the recent spread of the respiratory viruses. Those viruses being known as RSV, influenza, and of course, COVID. Our hospitals have been trending upward in numbers and admitting patients into the intensive care unit with either one of the three or the trio itself. As of Friday, the CDC and all of our Illinois counties have been to immediate to a high level on COVID hospitalizations with a focus in Cook County and in DuPage County. Just want to remind everyone, they're looking at some data, and in that data, it is showing that some of this trend upward may have come from the assistance of holiday travel and of the wearing of immunity. Let's get vaccinated. Our office will be offering soon a booster vaccine event for those who need to come out and feel more comfortable with getting them in a group setting. With those, you can also have fun with, but we want to make sure that you get vaccinated and be safe. And most of all, as Dr. Maya talked about, she used to teach us how to properly wash our hands. Remember to wash your hands. But what's most important is remember to save your own life with basically just putting on a mask. When you're in big public places such as the grocery store and things of that sort, just want to let you know if you put on a mask, you can save yourself. With that being said, see you guys next Monday and good night.